how you deal changes a lot with time. I think some of the successes in your life prove to you that it's okay and you're going to go through those things. And some of those failures also prove to you that it's okay. I have a very similar situation with my life. My middle son, he was born at 32 weeks pregnancy. The way he was found out was kind of one of those things that if you don't believe in God, you have to start believing in something. And I remember going directly to the hospital, and my wife was crying, of course, and I was crying too, driving, not knowing what was going to happen. He would potentially have a kidney problem, and newly born could not have a kidney transplant. So he would just die because the kidney would not function. And at the time that he was born, he peed on the doctor, showing that the kidney was working. Pee from my kid was the most beautiful moment of my life in the end of the day. It changed my perspective of life. Of course, all that kind of maturity of thinking, I don't care if the company is going to succeed or not. It would be great if it does. I'm going to do the best. I'm going to work like crazy to make it succeed. But if it doesn't, what is that in that perspective of losing a kid, or in your case, losing your wife, right? I don't know what, something struck on me, and I started feeling thankful instead of feeling, why me? Because I think you have two ways of dealing with those things. There's always the, oh my God, why me? Why is that happening to me? I don't deserve that. And the second way is, if I'm going through that, it's probably because I'm strong. So thank God for thinking that I'm strong enough to go through that.
Fabricio, we're here. Thanks for being on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Taylor.
You are the epiphany of a serial entrepreneur. You've started like 100 companies, it seems like, in the last couple of decades. I think your first one you started at 26. I think you've now done 7 companies, some successes, some failures, some somewhere in between. What keeps you going? Why do you keep doing this?
I think I was born for that. I think I was born for 2 different things. One is companies, and the second one is driving. I love doing road trips. So I usually say that if I was not running a company, I would be a truck driver. That would be my...
What?
Yeah, I love driving around, and I just get in the car and drive.
Amazing. Why? What is it about driving that you love?
I don't know. I think I was born for that too. Everybody gets sleepy while driving. I don't. And I just love, I think it's a time that I'm more creative. Almost all of the very creative things I did in my life, I did while driving. Business ideas or anything related to the company, like inside of like feature ideas and things like that. So it's a moment that I feel kind of in peace. And that's my thing.
Driving like, we're in New York City right now in Times Square. That kind of driving, or no. Open road? Open road driving, yeah. Just so an example, in 2000, I moved to the U.S. from Brazil in 2014. And 2015, close to Christmas, I arrived home very stressed from work, and I said to my wife, hey, let's go on a road trip. And she asked me, when? And I said, well, how about tomorrow at 7 a.m.? And she was like, no, like, we have the kids, there's school, and let's go on Saturday. That was on a Thursday. Let's go on Saturday. I said, okay. And we left without knowing where to go. And the only thing I knew was that I was going to go in the direction of Chicago, because I hadn't been there. And I ended up in California after that. So after it was 25 days of driving, and it was amazing. And when I came back home, my kids were like, when is the next one? So that's our thing. Do you guys try to do them like every year? Do you
yeah, we do it more than once a year, and all of them are spontaneous. There's none of them are planned, and none of them we have anything booked. Yeah, we don't have hotels booked. We don't have a destination.
Dude.
We just get in the car and drive.
That's so good. What's a recent one that you really enjoyed?
I think West Florida, because very nice beaches. I didn't even know they had amazing beaches there, and we ended up there because someone told us about it, and we had a blast. It was awesome. But I don't even know how many I did already. So I based on my calculations, it was close to 80,000 miles in driving in these last 10 years since I've been in the U.S.
And do you take an RV, or do you just take a van?
Just we have a big SUV, and that's what we drive.
Yeah. How many kids?
3 boys.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah. That's wild. I love that we started off that way. When did you move to the States?
2014, early 2014, February 2014. So it's almost 10 years now, 9 years and a couple months.
So your first handful of companies were in Brazil?
Actually not. Actually, in these 10 years, I launched 5 companies in the U.S.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, before that, it was 2 companies in Brazil.
That's crazy. Let's take us back to the start. What was your first very first idea. You're 26. What was it?
So I'm 26, and I'm in a consulting company called Neoris, which is one of the competitors for Accenture and this type of stuff. They're owned by a group called Cemex in Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a big cement company. Yeah, it's a spin-off of the technology side of Cemex. And then I see an opportunity to build a tech-driven human resources company to hire people in tech in Brazil. So that's the first company I started, called Performa. And it was great, like it was a good gig, but it was more kind of it had technology, but it was services. Very services approach, right? So it wasn't very scalable. Then 2008 comes and we suffer a major hit. Nobody's hiring anybody in 2008. We have all this technology and all these processes, and we are processing thousands of candidates through our technology. So it was a pretty good technology, but I lose all customers pretty much. I kept a few of them. So I have to fold into this company into another company. And that was kind of a bummer for me. It was the first failure I had. And I kind of had to restart. And I joined as a partner in a company called Eco Aqua, which is a water treatment company. Nothing to do with technology. Become a partner there, and then the things start happening because we sold Eco Aqua to a big group, and that allowed me to come to the U.S. and start my technology-focused career here in the U.S.
Mm. What was technology just a passion of yours? Like, why did you decide? Because those are 2 or 3 very different.
I think it's an enabler only. It's a consequence being in technology. I think I'm an entrepreneur by heart, so I like doing companies and starting business. I love the 0 to 1. I usually say I love opening a company. Like the feeling of having the entity being created is an unmatched feeling for me. And I think technology becomes a consequence as things evolve, and as I want to scale things more and more, I start becoming more driven to technology.
So you like pain?
Yeah, it's
0 to 1. You like pain?
I love pain, and I love the 0 to 1 pain, which is the really painful pain.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
that's what I like.
It hurts. The theme of our podcast, as you know, is called the roller coaster, because I think if somebody asked me to describe what doing a startup or building a company is in one word, it's the best word that I can think of. And we often describe it as like normal humans go through life, and everybody has ups and downs. They have challenges, they have victories, and it sort of looks like this, right? But in a startup, it's like hyper-condensed into, and it looks more like a heart rate monitor.
Yeah.
Right? So it's very jagged, it's very up and down, and it happens in like hyper-condensed periods of time where in a day you could be highest of highs, lowest of lows, and everywhere in between several times, right?
Yep.
Was there a moment like in sort of building some of these first companies here in the U.S. where you went through just that insane topsy-turvy turbulence, but also had, victories, sort of what I'm describing?
Yeah, I think that Flieber is the first company which is my last one, my most recent one, is the first one that I have investment from VCs. The other companies we bootstrapped, myself and my partners.
Okay.
So it's a total different dynamics. When you have the investors, you have a different kind of pressure. And the reason why I raised capital for this one is because it's in an industry that is very unexplored. So there's an element of being able to accelerate growth that the other ones were more in more mature industries.
Yeah.
So, but then this roller coaster becomes crazy because you have different pressures coming from different angles. And I think that's what I've been living in the last 4 years, which is since I launched Flieber.
Now, if you had to choose, now having done both, would you choose to bootstrap your next one or choose to raise venture funding?
That's a great question that I ask myself all the time. I love my investors. I get along really well with them. And I think they are very, very important for a certain type of company.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a choice like, do I want to raise capital or do I?
Really
it's
depends.
A need.
Yeah.
It depends on the business, right?
Yeah.
So are you in a business that is capital intensive, that you need to develop a lot of technology before reaching a market, or that is very hard for you to grow? You need stamina, and stamina is capital, and you need investors. If you're in a business that you don't need that you from day one you can start having revenue. There's not a lot of, for example, Quartile is another business that I co-founded, which is an advertising platform. It's very technological, but in the end of the day, people are buying the service of managing advertising. If we are in the back end doing that with people or with technology, it's almost irrelevant. You can't do it with people. So in Flieber, which is a inventory planning tool, people use our tool to plan their inventory. So they want to see there the right amount of inventory coming from their ERPs. They want to see there all the POs coming from their production management systems. So you need to develop a lot of technology to enable the usage of the system. So those two different types of businesses demand different types of business models. So I think it's not an option, it's more a need.
So bootstrap. I'm just kidding.
No, at the end of the day, you can bootstrap because it's a lot less pressure, and I think the interests are more aligned if you're bootstrapping than if you have investors. They have their own set of interests, and many times they push you to make decisions, but not like good decisions, but based on their set of interests and not necessarily on your set of interests.
Yeah, and what a lot of people don't understand about relationship with investors is that they're also, in many ways, their own startup, and they're managing somebody else's capital, and they have their own pressures coming down from LPs, and sometimes LPs have pressures coming from other. It's like there's definitely sort of a supply chain of like, or a chain reaction of pressure that comes down, and ultimately it lands on the CEO.
Yep.
I think that, and then obviously the CEO can do what they want with that pressure. They can hold it, they can push it down on other people, and it's sort of this like never-ending pressure chain. But the way that I like to talk about it, and I'm curious if you feel this, is I think about the CEO as the center of a wheel. Okay, so the CEO is right in the hub, in the center of that wheel, and they have about 10 or so constituents that they need to care deeply about. Investors, the board of directors, if you have one, advisors, your team, your co-founder, your customers, your partners, your suppliers, vendor, right? The public's perception of you, right? So the CEO takes all that down pressure, nobody else.
Yep.
Not the number two, not the number three, not the it's the CEO. So all that pressure that we talked about, that buildup from LPs down to invest, it ultimately lands on you.
Yep.
And that is not a pressure that I wish on anybody, because it's really, really difficult, and it's can be depressing, and it's anxiety inducing, and all the words.
Yep.
What are your thoughts about, CEOs that deal with that sort of pressure? How do you deal with that sort of pressure? How do you advise people sort of think about that?
Yeah, I think how you deal changes a lot with time, and with I think some of the successes in your life prove to you that it's okay, and you're going to go through those things. And some of those failures also prove to you that it's okay, that you're not going to die because you failed, right? And once you rest in peace with all those two sides, that like I need success or I cannot fail, it becomes a lot easier. So today, my wife keeps saying that to me all the time, that it's impressive how I absorb that pressure without letting that, kill me. And I honestly think I can do that really well, but I think it's only because I have that, all the experience of the other companies, and I know that I'm going to be just fine no matter what happens. And I know that my team is going to be just fine no matter what happens. And I know that the world is going to be just fine no matter what happens. So it becomes much more a quest to try to make the best of it than a quest to succeed no matter what. Like if I don't succeed, if I fail, oh my God, that's the end of the world.
Over. Yeah.
So I think that brings a level of peace that changes. And I wish every single founder could feel that, because I can relate to the pressure, and I can relate to the imposter syndrome. For example, that's one thing that you have to deal with yourself all the time. Are you really are you really going to succeed? Do you really think you're going to succeed? Or you feel that you're kind of tricking others to think that you're going to succeed? And all those feelings come by all the time. but living in peace with those feelings is liberating. And nowadays, after many years of suffering a lot with those things, I think I can live with that pressure and not let it harm my life. So I don't bring that to my house. I don't shout with my kids, or I'm not fighting with my wife because of the pressures at work. But yeah, it's a hard. I can totally relate to that.
That's a really fresh perspective that you have. I had an experience in my life that my audience knows about with almost losing my wife. And I describe my life now as 31 years before that and everything after, and that perspective shift that I went through to be able to see the world through that type of lens that you talked about. Did you have something in your life happen, or did this sort of naturally? Yeah,
that's a great question. I'm smiling here because I have a very similar situation with my life, not with my wife, but with my middle son. So I have 3 sons, and when my middle son was born, he was born at 32 weeks of pregnancy, and the way he was found out was kind of one of those things that if you don't believe in God, you have to start believing in something, because it was a total coincidence, like many different factors that happened, that we found it out. If we hadn't found it out, he would have died. And I remember going directly from the doctor to the hospital, and my wife was crying, of course, and I was crying too, driving, not knowing what was going to happen. And I don't know what, something like struck on me, and I started feeling thankful instead of feeling kind of why me, right? Because I think you have 2 ways of dealing with those things. There's always the, oh my God, why me, right? Why is that happening to me? I don't deserve that. That's the first way of feeling it. And the second way is, hey, if I'm going through that, it's probably because I'm strong. So thanks something, energy, God, whatever you believe, for thinking that I'm strong enough to go through that. And I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be on his side no matter what happens. I'm gonna be there, and I'm gonna be the best dad possible to that kid, no matter how long he lives. And at the time, the problem was that he would potentially have a kidney problem, and newly born could not have a kidney transplant. So he would just die because the kidney would not function. And at the time that he was born, he peed on the doctor, showing that the kidney was working. And that was I think the most, a pee from my kid was the most beautiful moment of my life in the end of the day.
That's awesome. I love it.
And it changed my perspective of life, going back to what you were saying. I also split my life in 2, up to that moment and after that moment, because I think I'm a different person after that moment.
Yeah.
And of course, all that kind of maturity of thinking, I don't care if the company is going to succeed or not. It would be great if it does. I'm going to do the best. I'm going to work like crazy to make it succeed. But if it doesn't, what is that in that perspective of losing a kid, or in your case, losing your wife, right? So it's nothing. It's meaningful. So why am I going to worry about that? I'm just going to do another one and another one until
Totally.
Things go.
Totally. The realization that I had when we were in the hospital, and even like the subsequent probably 30 days after the hospital, as we were trying to get her to the other side, I thought about work and money and career and that sort of thing, 0. Yep. And there's going to be a lot of people that hear that and go, well, it's because you already had money. It's like, no, like 0, not at all.
Yep.
I didn't think about work. I wasn't thinking about all the pressures that you have as CEO, your customers, your team, all these things I described. I wasn't thinking about them at all. And it made me realize, like, it's just because it's not that important.
Yep.
Really.
And you have to go through that to realize that, right?
You do.
That's what's sad, right?
You do. There's no way to simulate it. Like I get asked all the time, well, how do I get there without literally losing a spouse, or almost losing a spouse or a child, or, this sort of trauma? And I don't have a great answer other than, like, I don't know, visualize that happening and really go to that place and see how it feels. It's not the same.
Yeah.
You can't replicate it.
Yep.
So shame on us for, not being able to figure out our priorities before something bad.
Yeah.
On that same thread, like, curious about your perspective on just like passion and purpose and fulfillment. Like, how do you think about these things? And how is like company building a part of those for you, if at all?
Yeah, I was involved in a few businesses that are not sexy. So one of them is water treatment, water and wastewater treatment. So zero sexy. Now it's, inventory and supply chain logistics, this kind of things. Zero sexy. So I don't believe that you have to follow your passion, meaning I think that passion is something that you build. And you build you have ways to force building passion, like to induce yourself to build a passion. Every day I wake up, I make a decision if I want to continue to be married to my wife or not. So it is a choice in the end of the day, right? I choose to be married to my wife. And to be married to my wife, I choose to be passionate about her. And I think it's the same thing with a company. I think people have this feeling that, oh no, I like surfing, so I have to do surfing for my life. No, you don't. You can fall in love with wastewater treatment. You just have to be open to falling in love with wastewater treatment, right? So I am extremely passionate about inventory. Today, that is my passion, my number one passion, aside from my family, of course, but my number one passion, my number one obsession. If you asked me 4 years ago, I didn't even know what was inventory, right? I didn't like, it was not something that I said, okay, I'm passionate about inventory, so I'm going to use that for my life. So I think passion is a choice. I think passion is a state of mind. You can develop passion for many different things. And I think my entrepreneurial career is kind of related to that, because what I'm always in a quest for is my next passion, right? What is the next thing that I'm going to fall in love with? Because this feeling of falling in love is amazing. Mm-hmm. It's like the best feeling in the world, right? And being obsessed by that thing. So one day we will not be inventory anymore. I'm going to have to find something else, and I'm going to find something else, and that's going to become my number one passion and obsession at that time, right? So I think it's a little different, the perspective that I have from many other people's perspectives that think that you have to find your passion first and then follow it.
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
Versus developing it. I like that. I think there's, we've talked a little bit on the podcast about many of the guests that we have on are multiple time founders, right? They've exited a company at least once, and now they're working on their second or their third, or in your case, your seventh, right? What sort of advantages do you feel like multiple time founders have? And maybe in your case, like, I'd love to hear kind of from the first company what you've learned along the way after doing each one, and why those experiences have prepared you to be the best CEO possible today.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to be that structured to know each company, but I think in the beginning, first I was 26 years old. That's too young. You're just figuring things out. You have no idea about anything. You don't even have idea about relationships. And so you make a lot of simple mistakes on a day-to-day. Yeah. At the same time, you have that naiveness that is awesome, that makes you be creative. And there's a lot of good things about being a 26-year-old founder. But you make a lot of mistakes. I call it easy mistakes that once you are more mature, you look back and you're like, oh God, I was so dumb, right? And then you go to, so my second company, which was the water treatment company, I achieved great success with that company. So we sold it to the largest construction group in Latin America, and it was like a big sale, and it was like success, and I was 30. And then you think you're the king of the world. Then you're like, oh God, I'm the best. I don't make any more mistakes, and the world is eating off my hand, and I'm better than everybody else, which I think always happens with people who have exits at a younger age, right? I think under 30. And then reality strikes, and then you start understanding, you build your next one, and you're like, oh no, I'm not, I still make mistakes, and people don't like me that much as I thought they would. And then you start the realization process that I think is what led me to be who I am today, which is I'm not more special than anybody. I'm not smarter than anybody. I'm just, the only thing I have different than most people is that I work a lot. I work the hell out of myself. So I wake up every day at 3:30 a.m. I start working, and that's my passion. I love doing that. As I said, I'm obsessed by that.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing that I feel today is the idea that a company is all about the people in the company. So my role as a CEO, and I'm going to write a book about that eventually, is to do three things. Is to motivate people, empower people, and give them infrastructure. Infrastructure being like an open concept, like team, capital, and tools, systems, and everything else that they need. So I deeply believe that if I hire the right people, if I keep them motivated, if I empower them to make decisions, if I give them the infrastructure needed to operate in their prime, the company is like the success is a consequence of that, because those people are going to develop the things that I wouldn't have any idea about how to do it, right? So that's, I think, the biggest difference between the companies that I had before and the more recent companies is that realization, is the realization that I'm a server of the team. So CEOs are most of the time is like the stars, right? So you're the leader, you're like the idea is that you are here and they are following you. And I really don't think it's that way. I think it's the opposite. I think it's the team going and I am like trying to, give them whatever they need to keep going, right? So I think that's the biggest realization I have today.
That's great. On the topic of team, where do you, or when you're thinking about hiring somebody in a startup, regardless of the role, like what are the things you're looking for, right? There's a lot of people probably here listening that maybe aren't ready to start a company, but they want to join a startup and they want to learn and they want to be a part of that process and building. What is like maybe the first, and I don't know what it is for your first 20 or 50 or 100 people, like what is the common thing that they have to be successful in a startup? Yeah,
in our case today, we built kind of organically, we built a very, very collaborative culture, like to the extreme, to the point that I have to say to the team, hey, you don't have to always stop what you're doing to help other people because you have your things to do too. So I don't think anybody that is not collaborative fits in the culture, but I think each company is different. I think if you want to join a startup, I think the biggest thing is perseverance. You cannot be a person that gets down when you get a no or when you don't reach what you want to reach, or when your leader, CEO, or whoever it is, your leader is changing directions, because we do that every single day. So we change directions every single day, especially pre-market fit. You have to change directions all the time. So if you cannot live in this uncertainty, then you're not fit for startup, because startup is about uncertainty and about perseverance. Elon Musk says one thing that I think is great. He says that most companies don't fail. They just didn't give enough time to succeed.
Absolutely.
And I completely agree with that. I have no question that Flieber is going to be successful. It's just a matter of how long it will take for it to be a multi-billion-dollar company. But it will be, and we just have to persevere.
I recently did a video on Instagram where I talked about the number one quality of a successful founder. And, I used to ask like our investors and people that are way smarter than me this question all the time that have worked with lots of startup founders. I'm like, what's the common thing? And things that are important are things like, are they highly technical? Are they operational? Can they raise money? Are they educated? Are they smart, right? IQ, EQ, all these kind of things. But it's like the one that always rang true was resilience, or in another way to say it, perseverance. Yeah. And literally in this video that I produced, and I'll send it to you after this, I literally say the words, again, it comes down to the founder who just keeps the company around long enough. Yep. Like if you're just there and you just don't die, eventually something great's going to happen. And so
provided that you are in a segment that is ripe for what you're building, and you're building something that people want to use, or solving a problem, right? Yes. But I completely agree with that.
But a lot of great companies that have checked all those boxes, they fail because they just don't put on their sort of wartime hats when the macro gets tough, or fundraising gets tough, or customers it's like, no, you got to just keep going. You got to figure out how to keep going.
Yeah.
I love that. I want to talk about your company that you're working on now. So you built 6 companies. You're on your 7th. This company called Flieber. Sounds incredibly boring.
Yep, it is.
like you admitted to. What is the problem that you're actually solving? Why are you doing it?
Yeah. So I was in Brazil. We sold the water treatment company. I decided to come to the US. I needed a work visa, and I opened a hedge fund in Manhattan called Victory Capital, because opening companies is the only thing that I know how to do. Nice. And I was running that company when I met, 2.5 years later, I met a guy who was opening an Amazon store. So I got really intrigued, because first, he was a very capitalized guy, and second, probably the smartest person I've ever met. And I was like, oh, this guy is onto something. But Amazon stores were something that I didn't even know at the time was a business. I thought it was something that you would do in between jobs or things like that. Because of that, I ended up going into this retail world, I call it modern commerce. So it's the modern world of retail, like marketplaces and Shopify with platforms. And we started this company just to get into this segment. And a few months later, we started a company called Sellers Funding that now rebranded to Sellers Fi, which is a financing business. And the whole case behind it is that retail is a very capital-intensive business. And all these people that are new to retail, to this new world of retail, they don't have access to traditional lines of credit. So there was a gap between the need for capital and the offer. And Sellers Fi today is like a big company already in this segment. And a few months later, we launched a company called Quartile, which is the advertising platform that I was talking about. And today, Quartile is the biggest in the world, the biggest cross-channel platform for advertising in the world. And then Flieber. And why Flieber? Because throughout this whole process, I understood that as retail moves online, sales become digital, advertising becomes digital, the customer becomes digital, the customer relationship becomes digital, payments become digital, but the only thing physical is inventory. So I understood that inventory would be at the center of all complexities as a business model moving forward. Then I understood that the whole traditional world of retail is about having products on shelves to enable sales. So you have to put your products on a Walmart or Target shelf so that a customer can go there, see it, and buy it. So for you to sell, you have to have as many products spread across as many shelves as possible so that you enable more sales. And when you go online, you're selling off of a website. So you don't need the physical product to enable the sales anymore. The product is just delivered to the customer. So all of these changes in the way retail operates make inventory become like the most important thing to be solved today. And then I ran across a number that is crazy, that $1.8 trillion are lost every single year due to stockouts and overstocks, which is an amazing number, $1.1 trillion, around 8% of total retail sales. And I understood it was like the biggest problem to be solved. So that's why I decided to solve this problem, get money from investors, because it's a hard problem to solve. It's big. It's in a big industry. And that's what I'm doing now. So Flieber is an inventory planning platform to help you navigate in this world where inventory becomes complex.
How long has the company been around?
4 years now, since literally 4 years on April 2nd.
Can you take us through from the inception, what was the first thing you did? Did you go out and raise money right away? Did you bootstrap for a little bit? Did you bring on a co-founder or a couple of co-founders? What was the very, very inception of the company? Yeah, so very, very inception of the company was, I had this idea. I needed a name. I didn't want to pay Google ads to have my name rank first, so I made up a name. I made up a name that didn't exist. So everything was free. Like the .com was just $30, and all the whatever I have. It was a strong name. It can be used as a verb. So like, let's keep fleebing. We say that all the time. Yeah. Short, strong. So I made up the name, and then I wanted to start building something, right? So I don't have a technical background, so I needed someone to help me, and I got a technical co-founder that joined me to help build this thing. And we raised a quick round. It was literally 48 hours, friends and family round with my own money and friends and family. We kind of bootstrapped it to the moment that we had enough revenue
to go to investors with a more robust, I would say, more leverage in getting capital from investors. So I ran the company for about 6 to 10 months. We were lucky to get early traction. So in 6 months, I had almost $500,000 in revenue for a SaaS business. Is pretty good.
Yeah.
And we were able to raise the capital, and we went from there.
And how much did you raise?
We raised a total of $20 million up to now. We're a Series A company.
In your first institutional round?
No, it was the second institute. So we raised the seed round. That was $2.5 million.
Was that the friends and family one?
No, the friends and family was $400,000.
Got it.
Then 2.5, and then the rest.
Nice.
It's a total of $20 million.
Nice.
Today, 19.7, I think.
Amazing. And who are some of your investors?
So we have GGV. GGV is a big fund, and I have Hans Tung. Hans Tung is considered by Forbes one of the top investors in the world, top 3 investors in the
he's
world.
A machine.
Yeah, and he is amazing. He was.
For those who are wondering with the accent, I call him Hans Tung.
Hans Tung, maybe.
But Hans
I call
Tung.
it Tung. Yeah. Maybe I'm more in a Chinese accent with a tongue.
That's probably right.
Yeah. But yeah, Hans Tung or Hans Tung, whatever.
Yeah.
So I say to him that he was one of probably the single best thing that happened to Flieber, because he attracts so much attention around him. Wow. So once he came in the seed round very early, 6 months of company. Once he came with GGV and Robin, who is his partner.
Robin Lee,
great. Yeah. Also, she's on my board. Amazing.
Oh, she's great.
Yeah, and very knowledgeable in this industry, so a lot to add.
Yeah.
But Hans has this whole everything, is around. Everything happens. So an example of that, I wanted to integrate with NetSuite from Oracle. And we were hitting some walls there inside of NetSuite because we were a startup, small company, nothing for NetSuite. And then I said to him, hey, do you know anybody in NetSuite that can help me out? And he was like, oh, yeah, I know Evan Goldberg, the founder. And I was like, yeah, do you mind talking to him? And he said, no, yeah, send me a blurb and I'll send it to him. In literally 6 hours, I had a call from the VP of partnerships of NetSuite saying, hey, yeah, let's integrate. We're going to become channel partners. So this is the kind of influence that he has. And this is only one example among a bunch of other ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, GGV is one. We have Cherubic. Cherubic was a fund also that led the seed round together with GGV. Cherubic is a Chinese fund from Matt Chang. He's based in Taiwan. And we have Danielle Dudham here in California, who is with us on the board and etc. And the reason why I wanted Cherubic is because a lot of what happens in this industry happens in China and Asia overall, and I wanted to have like a strong arm there.
Yeah.
So we have Cherubic. We have Monachis. Monachis is the biggest fund in Brazil, one of the biggest in Latin America.
Yeah. And
Carlo D'Apuzzo has been with us from the beginning. Amazing also contributions. He's in our board. So we have pretty strong investors. We also have other investors, AME from Jerry Yang, founder of Yahoo. Mm-hmm. So it's his family office. And we have Propel. Propel is a fund very strong in the financing industry. And the reason why they joined us is because they see Flieber as a finance play in the future. Like once we have, the scale, there's a lot of finance products or insurance products around what we do.
Nice.
We have Norte Ventures, also another institutional investor. Norte is a syndicate of technology founders. Also very cool approach. So yeah, we're lucky to have a bunch of very, very good investors.
That's amazing. What do you want to do with this company? Like what's your aspirations? Yeah,
that's another thing that changes with life. So in the beginning, you start companies to sell them, right? So you're like, oh my God, when is going to be my next exit?
Yeah.
Flieber is huge. Like the market is huge. As I was saying, we're tackling a $1.8 trillion problem. So it's a huge business. So I'm building this thing to last. I want to see Flieber be a name, a well-known brand that every single person that starts a retail business or that runs a retail business, they will have to have their Shopify site, their Amazon Marketplace, and their Flieber account to operate their inventory, right? So I don't feel like it's it's a business that I necessarily have to sell. That said, I have investors. I have all the team with options. So I have to find moments of liquidity that can prize those people. But I want Flieber to be lasting forever. I don't see it being folded into another company and just disappearing. I would hate to see that.
Amazing. This is great. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. I love to wrap every podcast with one question. With many aspiring, founders listening to this that are going to go on and start great companies, what's the one piece of advice that you would give them?
Don't follow your passion. I think the piece of advice I give you is find something that excites you as an opportunity and build a passion on that something. Don't be bound to trying, like the quest to always trying to find the passion can last forever. You can go through your whole life and not find whatever you consider to be a passion. So don't wait. Just get a good business, some good idea that you have that solves a problem of a meaningful number of people, and just build a passion for it.
Amazing. Amen. Let's wrap on that. Good to have you on. Thanks so much for coming in, and good luck with Flieber, with the company.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, man.